Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker says President Trump's latest behavior isn't just political, it's disturbing. After Trump threatened to jail Pritzker and Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson for opposing federal troop deployment, the governor accused aides of taking advantage of Trump's dementia. J.B. Pritzker is making a categorical statement that he believes Donald Trump has dementia. According to the Daily Beast and Vox, Trump sent 500 National Guard troops into Chicago without state approval, then accused local leaders of failing to protect ICE agents. Pritzker called it crazy and urged Trump's family to intervene. So, is the president, is he suffering dementia? Is he insane, perhaps? Now, legally, insane means unable to tell right from wrong. I don't know about dementia. I'm not a doctor, but is insane perhaps the best label for J.B. Pritzker to be using against Donald Trump? Medically, it refers to a severe disorder impairing judgment, but in everyday speech, insane simply means irrational or detached from reality. And threatening to jail governors for disagreeing with you certainly fits that definition to most sane people, I would argue. Whether it's dementia or delusion, the danger is real. And the Constitution gives us two safeguards: impeachment and the 25th Amendment, both designed for moments exactly like this. Okay, let's dig a little bit deeper here. What does this really mean? J.B. Pritzker is saying the president suffers dementia. I don't know about dementia, but he clearly seems insane when he's running around the world saying, give me a Nobel Peace Prize, at the same time waging war with U.S. military and U.S. National Guard against American citizens, American cities, and pastors praying on the ground are shot in the head with rubber bullets. If that's not insane, there's no such thing as insanity. Let's dig a little deeper here. One of the big criticisms of the Democratic Party and Democrats in general, and I happen to share this criticism, is that they are weak, mealy-mouthed, too cautious, too much of put your finger in the air, see which way the wind is blowing. Let me take a poll first before I take a stance. I give a lot of credit to J.B. Pritzker for taking the gloves off and seeing what I happen to think he really believes. I do think he genuinely believes that Donald Trump has dementia. Again, J.B. Pritzker is not a medical doctor. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not asking you to take my medical evaluation of any politician, because I'm not giving them. But we got to be real here, folks. Most of America, and let's give credit where credit is due, Republicans saw this sooner than Democrats did, could clearly see that Joe Biden was too old. He seemed feeble. He seemed like a grandpa you would visit at the old folks' home, where someday he knew your name and some days he didn't. Some days he knew what year it was, and other days he thought it was 20 years ago. Millions and millions of Republicans saw it with their own eyes. And to their credit, they spoke out about it. And a lot of Democrats and a lot of liberals and a lot of progressive pundits for several years were like, nothing to see here, folks. Until finally it became blindingly obvious everyone in the first presidential debate last year. And at that point, it was like, we just can't keep kidding ourselves any longer. I think J.B. Pritzker makes a good point that we've reached that point with Donald Trump. When you have an American president shredding the Constitution, ignoring the role of Congress, waging war using U.S. military, U.S. ICE officials, U.S. police forces, National Guards, and waging war against Americans, that's completely against everything this country has ever stood for. No other president has ever done anything even remotely like this. And I think it is time for more and more people to call a spade a spade. If you are a Republican and 4 years ago you said, wow, Joe Biden is clearly too old. He seems like he's lost his mind. He seems like an old, dithering, drooling man who should have no place anywhere near the White House or the button. If you were one of those people, well, guess what? You deserve some credit. You're maybe a day or two ahead of schedule, but ultimately you were proven right. But it's time we both were honest, and it's time we're honest about both parties. We have a situation where the Republican Party now has a leader who has gotten himself elected president of the United States, and by every objective standard, is crazier than doing crazy things, much crazier than Joe Biden ever did. And it is increasingly obvious to people he is mentally impaired. I'm not saying that as a clinician. I'm not saying that as someone who is giving a medical analysis. I'm saying it as someone who has two eyes. In the same way, those of you with two eyes could tell a year ago, some of you 2 or 3 years ago, Joe Biden's too old for this. We got to somehow get him out of here, and we're certainly not going to vote for him again. Anyone with two eyes could see that. They didn't have to be a gerontologist to figure it out. And if you figure that out, you should be able to figure out that the absolute incoherent nonsense coming out of Trump's mouth is similarly bat excrement insane. Trying to keep this a family-friendly show here. It's utterly, bizarrely insane, the things he says, the things he does. Waging war against fellow Americans is, by all accounts, until he became president, if you had said to any voters, Republican or Democrat, hey, what do you think of a president who says, I don't like this state, so I'm going to go to states where there is a city that has a mayor of a different party of mine that's had crime decreasing for years, and I am going to use military force, National Guard, American police officials to go in and crack skulls and maybe even shoot a gun at the head of a pastor who's praying. I think across the political spectrum, you would have heard outrage. You would have heard, that's insane. You would have heard politicians on the right saying, this is the sort of government overreach we've been warning about. This is the totalitarian extremist regime we've been warning about. This is why people need to have guns to fight, to prepare themselves, to defend themselves from this sort of government overreach. That's what people on the right would have said. People on the left and the center would have been equally as appalled. And yet it's happening now right in front of us. And most people, I don't see it, how the stock market do today. I don't see it, how can I sell more soybeans today? It's right in front of us, folks. We need to wake up. So again, I'm not going to make the assertion that Donald Trump is suffering dementia or Alzheimer's. I'm not medically classified to do that, but I am a human being, a sentient human being with two eyes. And to me, it is abundantly obvious that he is insane. Saying you won a peace prize and you're using the military to attack American citizens is insane. Routinely ignoring everything the Constitution tells you you can and can't do, even though you're sworn to uphold the Constitution, is insane. Destroying one of the greatest economies in the world and destroying certain industries, like our soybean farmers industry, is insane. Now, there are a couple of solutions. Well, there's really four kind of solutions. One is the 25th Amendment, which would allow the vice president and the cabinet to deem him unfit, confirmed by Congress. Let's face it, that's not going to happen because the vice president and the cabinet are sycophants. They are henchmen, and they live in terror and fear of ever disappointing their leader. So while that's theoretically possible, if we actually had sane, responsible, and respectable leaders who cared more about their country than partisanship, I do believe that right now the case would be obvious to the vice president and the cabinet that our incumbent president should be removed from office. But that's not going to happen. Next solution is impeachment. The House charges and the Senate convicts by 2/3. Well, that's not going to happen. Why? Because the Senate is controlled by Republicans, and they're not even going to get a majority of the Republicans. And the Republicans, again, live in constant fear. As Mitt Romney, a former U.S. Senator, pointed out, he had other Republican senators tell him they would have liked to have impeached Trump. They lived in fear. They lived in fear because if they disappointed their leader, they would be inundated with death threats. And they could not afford $5,000 a day for personal security the way someone who's worth $500 million like Mitt Romney can do. So it's not going to happen through impeachment. One partial fix would be if the Democrats take back one or both chambers of the Congress. Highly unlikely they're going to take back control of the Senate next year, even if there are fair elections. The House, certainly historically, is likely to shift to the party out of power, which would be the Democrats. And they should take control. They could at least start investigating the president. They could have a trial and impeach him. They're not going to convict him, but they could do that. That would certainly at least slow down some of the madness. Another option is I'm not wishing any ill will on someone, but one too many McDonald's hamburgers and fries and double scoops of ice cream for dear orange leader. And well, you can figure it out. Again, I'm wishing no ill will, no ill health to anyone on this, but that would solve the problem. There's also just the possibility of the ultimate in corruption. Maybe members of both parties just make a deal and say, let's just give Trump all the gold in Fort Knox if he just agrees to resign or even leave power, because he increasingly looks like he wants a third term, a fourth term, Trump forever. So maybe the only way to get him out of office or to not run again is to just say, okay, we're giving you all the gold in Fort Knox. That's another potential solution. Is that constitutionally kosher? No, but nothing else seems to be these days either. I do think if you are someone who is a center-right person, someone who actually liked George Bush, either one of them, or Ronald Reagan, or John McCain, or Mitt Romney, if you're a center-right politician, if you're a Republican, and you believe in traditional Republican values, if you're a centrist, if you're a Democrat of any persuasion, you need to stop pretending that this is normal, that this is rational, that this is just another day of politics, and these Washington politicians, they can't get along, and no, these are crazy times, and the craziness is emanating from one source. And it's emanating from the White House. And it is time to call a spade a spade. This president is insane. Again, I'm not saying he has dementia. I'm not saying he has Alzheimer's. I'm saying by the commonly held notion of insanity, someone who's completely unable to distinguish good from bad, evil from positive, this president fits the bill. And more of us need to say it.